Scroll disclaimer: this story is a fictional and dramatized account created purely for entertainment purposes. All characters, settings, and events are the product of imagination. Any resemblance to actual people, living or dead, or to actual events is purely coincidental. The story includes emotional, psychological, and social themes intended to provoke thought and engagement, but not to promote any specific behavior or belief. Emily Parker had always played the part of the supportive wife. For 7 years, she had stood by Mark's side through promotions, late-night emails, and weekend office emergencies. She didn't know much about his company, just the name, the logo, and that it demanded far too much of her husband's time. So when Mark came home one evening with a rare smile and said, "Raymond Clark invited us to the annual executive dinner. He specifically asked for you to come," Emily was flattered. A personal invite from the CEO? That was big. Mark's tone was a mix of pride and nervousness. "It's kind of a big deal, Em. Just be yourself and everything will be fine." That Saturday evening, Emily dressed with care, an elegant navy blue gown, soft curls in her hair, and just enough perfume to feel confident. The venue was a 5-star hotel ballroom lit with crystal chandeliers and draped in velvet curtains. A jazz quartet played softly in the background as waiters floated through the crowd with trays of champagne. Mark looked handsome in his tailored suit. He held her hand as they walked in. "Just smile and say nice things about the company," he joked. Emily nodded, trying to ease her nerves. Then came the moment. Mark tapped her arm. "Emily, this is Mr. Raymond Clark, my boss." Mr. Clark turned, a tall man in his late 40s with sharp eyes and a smile that didn't quite reach them. "So this is the famous Emily," he said, extending his hand. She smiled politely. "It's nice to finally meet you, Mr. Clark." His handshake was firm, too firm, and lingered longer than it should have. As they all sat at the table, he continued to speak with her directly, asking questions about her background, her hobbies, even what kind of wine she preferred. His tone was smooth, charming on the surface, but there was something about the way he looked at her, something unsettling. Then, during a moment of light conversation, as she reached for her glass, his hand brushed against hers. It could have been innocent, but it wasn't. His fingers pressed slightly, deliberately, before pulling away. Emily stiffened. No one seemed to notice. Mark was busy laughing with a colleague on the other side of the table. She forced a smile, her heart suddenly racing. What just happened? It was a fleeting gesture, but the message it carried was loud and clear, at least to her. Was it a mistake? Or a message? She didn't say anything that night. But as they drove home, her mind couldn't stop replaying that single, uncomfortable moment. And it would only be the beginning. Emily stood in the kitchen the next morning, sipping her coffee, trying to brush away the strange memory from the night before. Maybe she had misread it. Maybe it really was just an accidental touch. The more she tried to convince herself, the more unsettled she became. The house was quiet. Mark had left early for a weekend strategy meeting, something about quarterly projections. Emily tried to focus on folding laundry when her phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Good morning, Emily." The voice was low, polished, and unmistakably familiar. "This is Raymond Clark." Her heart skipped. "I just wanted to thank you again for coming last night." You added, a lot of elegance to the room. Emily paused. "Oh, thank you, Mr. Clark. That's kind of you." "You can call me Raymond," he said smoothly. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "No, just surprised," she replied, keeping her voice measured. "Well," he continued, "some people leave a lasting impression, and you certainly did. I'd like to stay in touch." The call ended after a few minutes of polite chatter, but it left Emily rattled. There was no reason for him to contact her directly. It wasn't normal, not in a professional setting. When Mark came home that evening, she casually mentioned it while clearing the dishes. "He called you." Mark laughed. "That's strange, but I guess he liked you. You made a good impression. That's a good thing, right?" "Yeah, I guess." She forced a smile, but her stomach churned. Mark was too deep in work mode to notice. The next morning, it happened again. And then again. Every day around mid-morning, a message or a quick call. Sometimes it was a compliment, sometimes a question about something trivial: books, music, art. Always just enough to be polite, never enough to be proof of anything improper. Emily stopped replying, but it didn't stop him. What troubled her even more was how careful he was, never anything too direct, always veiled under charm and compliments. But the persistence was unnerving. She began to feel trapped in her own home. She didn't want to tell Mark again. He already seemed to think she was imagining things. And besides, Clark was his boss. His future at the company depended on that relationship. That weekend, while Mark typed away on his laptop, Emily sat on the couch, her phone in hand, staring at another unread message from Clark. Still thinking about your smile. Hope your day is as beautiful as you are. Her fingers trembled. This wasn't just politeness anymore. This was something else. And she wasn't sure how much longer she could ignore it. It was a quiet Wednesday morning when the doorbell rang. Emily opened the front door to find a sleek, black-gloved courier holding a small, elegant white box. "Delivery for Mrs. Emily Parker," he said, handing it over with a polite nod before walking away. She hadn't ordered anything. There was no return label, just her name written in looping cursive on a cream envelope taped to the top. Inside the box lay a delicate bracelet, gold, thin, adorned with tiny diamonds. Luxurious. Expensive. Far beyond anything she or Mark would casually buy. Her hands shook as she unfolded the note tucked inside. "To the most elegant woman I've met in years. R." Her stomach dropped. She didn't need to guess who R was. There was only one man who fit that initial, and only one who'd been weaving himself into her world in such a calculated way. Emily stood frozen in the foyer, staring at the bracelet. It sparkled under the morning light, beautiful but sinister. A gift disguised as flattery, loaded with power. She shoved the box into her closet, hiding it beneath a pile of scarves. Out of sight. For now. That evening, Mark came home in high spirits. "You'll never believe this," he said, dropping his briefcase by the door. "Clark just approved my promotion. Senior Operations Director. It's happening, Em." Finally. Emily tried to smile, but her mouth felt stiff. "That's amazing. I'm proud of you." He leaned in and kissed her forehead. "I couldn't have done it without you." The words hit like a punch. Was this promotion earned? Or bought not with money, but with her silence? Emily felt a storm swirl inside her. She didn't want to taint Mark's joy, not now. Not with this milestone he'd worked so hard for. But the bracelet in the closet felt like a weight pressing down on her chest. Later that night, as Mark snored softly beside her, Emily sat on the edge of the bed in the dark. She opened her phone and reread Clark's latest message, sent just hours earlier. Sometimes a small gift says what words cannot. It was manipulative, calculated, dangerous. And yet, she hadn't blocked him. She hadn't told Mark the truth. Why? Was it fear? Shame? The fear of not being believed? She looked down at her reflection in the phone's dark screen. Her face was pale, her eyes tired. She felt like a stranger in her own life, a supporting character in someone else's game. The bracelet remained hidden, but its presence was loud in her mind. This wasn't just a flirtation anymore. It was a power play, and she was running out of ways to pretend it wasn't happening. Emily avoided the bracelet like it was poison. She didn't touch it, didn't even look at it. But it was always there, in the back of her closet and the front of her mind. For days, she tried to focus on anything else. Chores. Grocery runs. Reading a novel she couldn't follow. But nothing stopped the anxiety that followed her around like a shadow. She kept her phone on silent and rarely checked her messages. Then, one afternoon, she found an envelope in the mailbox, handwritten again, her name on the front. No postage. Someone had placed it there personally. Inside, just a folded piece of stationery. "There's something I want to share with you, something that could change everything. Let's talk. Just coffee. Tomorrow. Noon. Lincoln Park Cafe. I'll be waiting." Emily's hands tightened around the paper. He had crossed another line, showing up at her home again, this time without the mask of gifts or polite texts. She stood frozen on the porch for minutes before walking inside. She didn't tell Mark. What could she say? Your boss is trying to meet me behind your back again. No. It was too dangerous. Too loaded. But her silence wasn't helping anymore. She sat in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, wondering, what could he possibly want to say? What could he offer me? Against her better judgment, she went. Lincoln Park Cafe was quiet at noon, only a few scattered customers and soft music playing through the speakers. Emily wore dark glasses and a coat, hoping no one would recognize her. Clark was already there, sitting by the window in a dark blazer, sunglasses perched on his head like a man who owned every room he entered. He stood as she approached. Emily, he smiled. You came. I don't have long, she said, not sitting. Please, he gestured to the chair across from him. I won't take much of your time. She sat, tense and silent. Clark leaned forward. I know this has been unusual. I've probably come off too strong. But the truth is, I admire you. You're not like the other women I meet. There's something real about you. She stared at him. You brought me here to say that? He smiled slowly. Not just that. I wanted to offer you something. If you ever feel unappreciated, trapped in routine, I can help you. I can make life easier. Her jaw clenched. Are you offering me a transaction? He shrugged, unapologetic. Call it what you want. You deserve more than being just someone's wife. I can give you more. She stood. You're disgusting. Think about it, he said calmly. Your husband's future is bright. It can stay that way. Emily walked out, heart pounding, rage mixing with nausea. Her legs felt weak, but she didn't stop until she reached her car. She wasn't flattered anymore. She was furious. And she finally understood this wasn't about affection. It was about control. The ride home was a blur. Emily gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying to focus on the road while her mind unraveled. Clark's words echoed in her ears like a curse. Your husband's future is bright. It can stay that way. It wasn't just manipulation anymore. It was a threat. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay next to Mark in silence, wondering how many layers of truth she had buried under fake smiles and unfinished sentences. Her secrets were no longer safe, not even from herself. For the next 2 days, she avoided Mark emotionally. She cooked, smiled, nodded, but stayed distant. Guilt clung to her like a second skin. She knew it was only a matter of time before something broke. And then it did. It happened on a Sunday evening while Emily was folding laundry upstairs. Mark had borrowed her laptop to prepare a presentation. She had forgotten that Clark's messages, once deleted from her phone, had synced to her email backups. Mark's voice called out from the living room, sharp and confused, Emily. Her stomach dropped. She ran downstairs to find him sitting on the couch, the laptop open on his lap, his face pale. What is this? He asked, turning the screen toward her. There it was. A string of messages. Clark's compliments. The bracelet message. The coffee meeting invitation. Mark looked up at her, betrayal burning in his eyes. How long has this been going on? Emily opened her mouth, but no words came. Did you hide this from me? His voice cracked. Did you meet him? I didn't ask for any of it, she finally said, her voice shaking. I didn't encourage it. I ignored him. I tried to protect you. Mark stood. Protect me? By lying? By keeping this secret while he's been texting you like you're some kind of, I never responded after the first few calls, she said. I thought it would stop. And when it didn't, I didn't know how to tell you without ruining everything you worked for. Tears welled up in her eyes. He stepped back, breathing heavily. So, what? You thought staying quiet was the answer? You thought that was helping me. I didn't want to be the reason you lost everything. I'd rather lose everything, Mark said coldly, than lose trust in you. Silence fell between them like a wall. Emily packed a small bag that night and left for her sister's house. She didn't argue. She didn't cry until she closed the car door and drove away. It wasn't her. She decided she wouldn't stay silent anymore. A few days later, she wrote an email, short, direct, and professional, and sent it to the company's human resources department. She detailed the phone calls, the messages, the bracelet, the invitation, and the coffee meeting. She even attached screenshots of the texts Mark had found. She didn't want revenge. She wanted to protect others. She had no idea what would happen next. 2 days later, HR called her in for an in-person interview. Emily was nervous, but they listened, attentively, seriously. When she hesitantly asked, "Am I the only one this has happened to?" the woman on the other side of the desk gave her a measured look. "You're not." It hit her like a punch to the chest. Other women had come forward. Some were current employees. Others were spouses of Clark's team, just like her. Some had been dismissed. Others were quietly transferred or pushed out. No one had spoken publicly, fearing the consequences. But now there was a pattern. A dangerous one. The investigation picked up momentum. A few days later, Emily received another email, this time from a woman named Hannah, who used to work as Clark's executive assistant. "Thank you for speaking up," the email read. "I didn't have the courage when it happened to me. But maybe now I do." The words made Emily cry for the first time in days. Mark still hadn't called. She didn't expect him to. Their marriage was fractured, held together by a decade of memories, but stretched thin by distrust. Still, she hoped time would give them space to understand each other again. One morning, her sister knocked on the bedroom door and handed her the newspaper. Front page of the local business section. CEO Raymond Clark under investigation for harassment allegations. His photo was printed beneath the headline, looking polished and smug, like always. Emily stared at it, not with fear, but with resolve. Later that day, she got a text from Mark. "I read the article. I'm proud of you for telling the truth. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." Just 10 words. But enough to tell her something had shifted. Clark's carefully crafted empire was beginning to crack, not because of lawyers or boardroom drama, but because the women he tried to silence were no longer afraid to speak. In the weeks that followed, Raymond Clark's name became a regular feature in company emails, news blogs, and whispered hallway conversations. The once untouchable CEO, polished, powerful, respected, was now the subject of a full-scale investigation. And it all began with one woman deciding to stop being quiet. Emily returned home 2 weeks after the scandal broke, unsure what kind of man she'd find waiting. Mark greeted her at the door, tired-eyed and quiet. They didn't speak much that first night, just shared a meal, watched TV in silence, and slept in the same bed like strangers. But there was no anger anymore. Just room to rebuild. The company, meanwhile, was unraveling the layers Clark had carefully hidden behind charm and influence. Multiple women, from different levels of the organization, stepped forward. HR created a dedicated task force. Legal counsel got involved. There were interviews, written statements, and eventually leaked reports. Clark denied everything at first. He called the women overly sensitive, said the messages were misinterpreted, and that the gifts were tokens of appreciation. But the evidence stacked higher by the day. Dozens of messages. Gift receipts. Witness accounts from staff members who had seen him meet with female employees behind closed doors. The pattern was undeniable. Eventually, the board could no longer protect him. 3 weeks after the investigation started, Clark was forced to resign. Quietly. No press conference. No apology. Just a brief corporate statement thanking him for years of service and wishing him the best in future endeavors. Mark received an internal memo shortly after. "Due to recent restructuring, your transfer to regional operations lead has been approved. Your contributions remain valued and independent of recent executive developments." He read it twice, then turned to Emily. "They're giving me the promotion." She smiled. "You earned it." He hesitated. "I don't want it to feel like it's tied to what happened." "It isn't," she said. "You worked for it. What happened with Clark has nothing to do with your value. And everything to do with his abuse of power." Mark nodded slowly. "You're right." That night, they really talked for the first time in weeks. About trust. About fear. About how her silence wasn't betrayal, but survival. And how his reaction had been rooted in shock, not judgment. They weren't magically healed. But they were beginning again together. Meanwhile, Clark's departure became a catalyst for change. The company revamped its ethics training. HR introduced anonymous reporting systems. And the corporate culture, once dominated by whispers and politics, began shifting toward accountability. All because one woman refused to stay quiet. And because others followed her lead. Emily realized something important. She had once felt powerless in the face of someone else's influence. But now she had become a voice that shook an empire. Not out of revenge, but out of truth. 6 months later, the house finally felt like a home again. The cold distance that had once lived between Emily and Mark was gone, replaced with something deeper, not just affection, but understanding. They didn't pretend everything was perfect. They worked on it. Slowly, honestly. Through counseling, shared silence, and long walks where words mattered less than presence. But something inside Emily had changed permanently. She was no longer just Mark's wife or the quiet woman who used to stay in the background of corporate events. She had become something more, a survivor, a truth-teller, and, unexpectedly, a leader. After the Clark scandal, emails started trickling in. Some from strangers. Others from women she had once passed in the office hallway and never spoken to. Their stories echoed hers, power imbalances, subtle intimidation, moments that felt too small to report but too big to ignore. So Emily started something simple, a support group. It met once a week at the local community center. At first, it was just 4 women sitting in a circle, sharing coffee and hesitant stories. No cameras. No pressure. Just honesty. Then it grew. Now there were over 20 members, wives, employees, interns, even former professionals who had left the workforce because they couldn't take it anymore. Emily didn't claim to have the answers. She simply listened. And that was enough to help others begin healing. Her story was eventually featured anonymously in a women's advocacy blog. The article went viral, not because of drama, but because of how painfully real it felt. It didn't end in revenge. It didn't become a court case. It wasn't exaggerated. It was simply the story of a woman who was uncomfortable, who was pushed too far, and who finally stood up, even when she was afraid. One afternoon, Emily was invited to speak at a women's leadership conference under the session titled "The Power of Speaking Up." Her heart raced as she stepped on stage, but the room greeted her with warm applause. She looked out over the crowd, strangers, allies, and survivors, and began, "There's a reason people like Clark survive for so long. It's not just because they're powerful. It's because we convince ourselves that what they're doing isn't bad enough to fight. But we forget that boundaries don't have to be shattered to be crossed. They can be brushed, nudged, gently eroded, until we're no longer sure whether we're overreacting or simply reacting at all. I'm here to remind you, your discomfort is enough. Your silence isn't weakness, it's survival. But when you choose to speak, you give others permission to do the same. That's how change begins. One voice at a time. In the front row, Mark sat quietly, eyes glassy, hands clasped in his lap. Pride shone on his face, not just for the woman he loved, but for the strength she had become. Emily had been touched by darkness, but she walked out carrying light. 52.